Now I was just Eleanor, an ex-convict with trembling hands and a name no one wanted to hear. The bus dropped me off 3 blocks from the small apartment I'd rented with what little remained of my savings. 9 years. I had served 9 years in Maplewood Correctional Facility for a crime I didn't commit, and everyone believed I was a murderer who had poisoned a helpless elderly woman for her money. I was 68 years old when I walked out of those gates. My nursing license had been revoked. My daughter refused to speak to me. My neighbors from my old life had signed petitions to keep me away from their neighborhoods. The woman who had dedicated 43 years to caring for the sick and dying was now seen as the monster who had ended Mrs. Dorothy Blackwell's life with insulin overdoses to inherit the $50,000 she had generously left me in her will. But I hadn't done it. God knows I hadn't done it. The first weeks of freedom were the loneliest of my life, more isolated than my cell had ever been, because in prison at least the other inmates spoke to me, even if it was to call me the angel of death. Out here, I was invisible. Store clerks looked past me. Former colleagues crossed the street when they saw me coming. I applied for jobs as a home health aide, a receptionist at medical clinics, even a janitor at the hospital where I'd worked for 20 years. Every application was denied. I finally found purpose volunteering at St. Michael's Hospital in the palliative care unit. They were desperate enough for help that they accepted volunteers with criminal records, though the coordinator made it painfully clear I would never be left alone with patients or medications. I would empty bedpans, deliver meals, read to patients, hold their hands, nothing more. I was grateful for even that. After 9 years of being told I was worthless, being allowed to comfort dying patients felt like a small redemption, even if I knew I could never truly clear my name. It was my 3rd week volunteering when I saw her. I was pushing a meal cart down the hallway of the 4th floor when a young woman in scrubs emerged from room 418. She froze when she saw me, her face draining of color. The tablet she'd been holding clattered to the floor. "Mrs. Walsh?" Her voice was barely a whisper. I stopped, studying her face. She was in her early 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and those distinctive green eyes that seemed familiar, though I couldn't place her. "Yes?" I said carefully. I'd learned to be cautious. Sometimes people recognized me from the news coverage of my trial, and their reactions were never pleasant. "It's Lily. Lily Chen. I used to." She swallowed hard, her eyes filling with tears. "I used to work at the Blackwell estate. When I was in high school, I was the housekeeper's daughter." My heart stopped. The Blackwell estate, where Mrs. Dorothy Blackwell had lived, where I had worked as her private nurse for the last 3 years of her life, where she had died, and where my life had ended with her. "Lily," I breathed. I remembered her now. A shy 12-year-old who used to help her mother clean the vast mansion, always reading in corners when she thought no one was watching. "You've grown, Mrs. Walsh. I need to tell you something." Her voice broke. I should have told someone 9 years ago, but I was so scared, and my mother said we'd lose everything if I spoke up, and I was just a kid, and I didn't understand what was happening until it was too late, and you were already in prison, and— "Slow down," I said gently, though my pulse was racing. "What do you need to tell me?" She looked around the hallway frantically. "Not here. Can we talk? Please?" "I finish my shift in 20 minutes. There's a chapel on the 1st floor." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Those 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. I went through the motions of delivering meals, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped a tray. What could Lily possibly know? What had she seen? When I reached the small hospital chapel, Lily was already there, sitting in the front pew with her face in her hands. I sat down beside her. "Mrs. Walsh, I saw what really happened the night Mrs. Blackwell died," she said without preamble. "I saw Marcus do it." Marcus? Mrs. Dorothy's grandson. The charming 35-year-old investment banker who had seemed so devoted to his grandmother, visiting her every week, bringing her flowers, reading her the financial pages. The man who had testified at my trial about how I'd been pressuring his grandmother to increase my inheritance, how I'd isolated her from the family, how I'd had unusual access to her medications. "What did you see?" My voice was steady, but inside I was screaming. Lily's story came out in a torrent. She'd been 14 at the time, helping her mother prepare the house for Mrs. Blackwell's 89th birthday party. It was late, nearly midnight, and she couldn't sleep in the housekeeper's quarters, so she'd gone to the library to find a book. That's when she'd seen Marcus in Mrs. Blackwell's study, carefully drawing clear liquid from a vial into a syringe. "I didn't think anything of it at first," Lily said, tears streaming down her face. "I knew Mrs. Blackwell was diabetic. I knew you gave her insulin shots. I thought maybe you'd asked him to do it because you were off that night." But something had felt wrong. The way Marcus had looked around nervously, the way he'd slipped the vial into his pocket instead of leaving it in the medical kit, the way he'd smiled to himself as he'd walked toward his grandmother's bedroom. Lily had followed him, hiding in the hallway. She'd watched through the cracked bedroom door as Marcus had gently woken his grandmother, told her he was worried about her blood sugar, convinced her to let him give her the injection. Mrs. Blackwell had trusted him completely. He gave her the shot, and she went back to sleep, Lily whispered. He stayed for maybe 5 minutes, watching her, then he left. I ran back to my room and hid under the covers. Mrs. Blackwell had been found dead the next morning. I had been the one to find her, actually, when I'd arrived for my morning shift. The autopsy showed lethal levels of insulin in her system. The police had found my fingerprints on the insulin vials in the medical cabinet. I'd had access to her room. I'd been named in her will. The case against me had been overwhelming, and I'd had no defense except my word, which meant nothing against the evidence. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I asked, and I hated the bitterness in my voice. 9 years. 9 years of my life. "I was 14, Lily sobbed. "My mother told me I must have been mistaken, that Marcus would never hurt his grandmother, that he was a successful, respected man, and I was just an immigrant housekeeper's daughter who'd probably be deported if I made accusations against a wealthy family. She said we'd lose our jobs, our home, everything. She made me promise never to speak of it." Lily had kept that promise, through my arrest, through my trial, through the years I'd spent in prison while she'd finished high school, put herself through nursing school, built a life. "But I never forgot," she said. "And when I saw you today, looking so small and tired in those volunteer clothes, I couldn't anymore. I can't live with this. You went to prison for something you didn't do. You lost everything." And I stayed silent. "Your mother?" I asked. "She passed away 2 years ago. I don't have to protect her anymore. And I'm an adult now. I'm a citizen. I have my own life. He can't hurt me the way I thought he could when I was 14. I sat in silence, trying to process this. After all these years, proof. A witness. "Would you be willing to tell this to the police?" I asked carefully. "Or to a lawyer?" Lily nodded firmly. "Yes. I've been thinking about it for years. I've written it all down, everything I remember. I want to make this right, Mrs. Walsh. I know it won't give you back those 9 years, but at least people will know the truth." I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. I'd cried them all out in prison. Instead, I just took Lily's hand. "Thank you," I whispered. The next day, Lily and I went to see a lawyer. Then to the police. At first, they were skeptical. A witness coming forward 9 years later? A witness who'd been a child at the time? It seemed convenient, questionable. But Lily was credible. She was a registered nurse now, respectable, with no criminal record. She had detailed notes from the years she'd spent trying to work up the courage to come forward. She passed a polygraph test, and when the police began investigating Marcus Blackwell more closely, things started to unravel for him. It turned out Marcus had been desperate for money 9 years ago. His investment firm had been on the verge of collapse. He'd had gambling debts. He'd been living far beyond his means. His grandmother's will had left the bulk of her estate to various charities, but there was still nearly $800,000 designated for family members. With me in prison for her murder, Marcus had argued successfully that I should be excluded from receiving my $50,000 bequest. More importantly, with suspicion cast on the will itself, he'd contested it, claiming his grandmother had been unduly influenced by me and wasn't of sound mind when she'd made such large charitable donations. He'd settled with the charities for a fraction of what they were owed and had pocketed the rest. The investigation revealed that Marcus had researched insulin overdoses extensively in the weeks before his grandmother's death. His computer search history, preserved on old hard drives, showed queries about undetectable murder methods and insulin poisoning symptoms. Most damning of all, when police searched his current home with a warrant, they found the original insulin vial tucked away in a box of his grandmother's belongings he'd kept. He'd been too sentimental, or perhaps too arrogant, to destroy it. There were still traces of the medication inside, and the serial number matched a prescription that had been filled at a pharmacy across town, not the one I used for Mrs. Blackwell's regular medications. Marcus had purchased it himself, under a fake name, using cash. The case was reopened. My conviction was overturned. Marcus Blackwell was arrested. I'll never forget the day I stood in that courtroom and heard the judge formally declare me innocent. The prosecutor who had argued so passionately for my conviction 9 years ago stood up and publicly apologized. The Blackwell family, what remained of them, sat in stunned silence. Marcus showed no remorse, even at his sentencing. He stared straight ahead as the judge gave him 25 years for murder and fraud. He'd stolen his grandmother's life and mine, all for money he'd already spent on luxury cars and expensive vacations. The state offered me compensation, $250,000 for wrongful imprisonment. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was something. More than money, though. I had my name back. The news coverage of my exoneration was extensive. Suddenly, the people who'd crossed the street to avoid me wanted interviews. My story was on the news, in the papers. Innocent nurse freed, after 9 years. My daughter called me for the first time in nearly a decade. She was crying. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have stood by you. We're rebuilding our relationship slowly." She has 2 children now, my grandchildren, who I'm just getting to know. They're 8 and 6. They think their grandmother is a hero who survived a terrible injustice. 10-2. Michael's hospital offered me a position as a patient advocate, helping families navigate end-of-life care decisions. It's not nursing, but it uses everything I learned in my 43 years of caring for the dying. My criminal record was expunged, and while I could theoretically fight to have my nursing license reinstated, I'm 68 years old. I've found my peace in this new role. Lily and I have become close. She was terrified of retaliation from the Blackwell family's friends, but I assured her we'd face it together. There was some backlash, people who claimed she was lying for attention or money, but the evidence was too strong. She's engaged now, to another nurse she met at St. Michael's. She asked me to be at her wedding. Sometimes I visit Mrs. Blackwell's grave. It's in a beautiful cemetery on the north side of town, under an old oak tree. I bring her flowers and tell her I'm sorry it took so long to find justice for her death. I like to think she knows the truth came out eventually. I won't lie and say those 9 years didn't change me. I'm harder now, more cautious. I have nightmares sometimes about the cell, the sounds of the prison at night, the way the guards looked at me like I was something evil. I have arthritis in my hands from the cold in my cell, and my back aches from the thin mattress I slept on for all those years. But I also learned something in those 9 years. I learned that the truth has weight. It sits heavy on those who bury it. Lily carried it for almost a decade, and it ate at her until she couldn't bear it anymore. Marcus carried it too, and his arrogance about getting away with it ultimately led to his downfall. He couldn't resist keeping that vial, a trophy of his perfect crime. The truth doesn't always surface immediately. Sometimes it takes years, even decades. Sometimes it takes a frightened 14-year-old girl growing into a brave 21-year-old woman. Sometimes it takes someone losing everything before they can get anything back. But it does surface. Eventually, always, it rises. I share my story now at wrongful conviction advocacy events. I talk to nursing students about ethics and truth-telling. I meet with other exonerees, people who spent even longer than I did behind bars for crimes they didn't commit. We're a community of survivors, bonded by our stolen years and our hard-won freedom. And every day, when I walk into St. Michael's Hospital and pin on my volunteer badge, I'm grateful. Grateful to Lily for her courage. Grateful to be free. Grateful for my daughter's forgiveness. Grateful that Mrs. Blackwell finally got justice. I lost 9 years of my life. I lost my career, my reputation, my relationship with my daughter, my home. I lost the chance to see my grandchildren be born. I lost count of how many times I wanted to give up, to stop fighting, To accept that I would die in prison with everyone believing I was a murderer. But I'm here. I'm free. The truth came out. And that, I've learned, is everything. On quiet days, when I'm reading to a patient in their final hours, I sometimes think about what Marcus must be feeling in his cell. I don't take pleasure in his imprisonment the way some people think I should. I just hope he understands, finally, what he took from both me and his grandmother. The judge asked me during the hearing if I had anything I wanted to say. I looked at Marcus and said simply, "I forgive you, but I'll never forget what you did." People asked me later why I said that. Why forgive a man who stole 9 years of my life? Because holding on to hatred would have let him steal the rest of my years too. And I'm not giving him one more day. I'm 68 years old. I volunteer at a hospital. I'm rebuilding a relationship with my daughter. I'm getting to know my grandchildren. I have a small apartment with a window box where I grow herbs. I have friends now. Other volunteers. People who know my story and admire my resilience. It's not the life I had planned. It's smaller, quieter, marked by loss. But it's mine. It's honest. It's free. And I'm grateful for every single day of it. Last week, a young nurse approached me in the hospital cafeteria. She'd seen my story on the news. She wanted to know how I survived, how I kept hope alive during those 9 years. I told her the truth. I didn't always keep hope alive. There were days, months even, where I had none, where I wanted to die. But somewhere deep down, I believed that the truth mattered, that it would matter eventually. And I was right. She asked if I was angry about the years I lost. Every day, I admitted. But I'm also grateful for every day I get back. Anger and gratitude can exist together. I've learned to hold both. That night, I called my daughter. We talked for an hour about nothing important. Her kids' soccer games, her husband's new job, the weather. Normal, boring, beautiful conversation. When we hung up, I sat in my small living room and cried. Not from sadness, but from the sheer, overwhelming relief of being believed again, of being loved again, of being free. The truth will always rise to the surface. It just sometimes takes longer than we'd like. But it's worth the wait.